Welcome back to another episode of TVGP's Critical Misses, the show where we're picking up on all the media hits we missed, catching up on
I
them,
hate you.
picking them up from the store, doing all the... We're having a rough day today. I'm your host,
Heading
Boston.
to our local Blockbuster.
That's right, heading to our local Tower Records, picking up the latest Poets of the Fall album. I'm your host, Boston. Joining me as always is Moonpear.
Howdy, and I prefer Granger Games. Shout out to all my UK homies.
There you go. We are here to listen to the latest Poets of the Fall album, Ghostlight, released in this year, 2022.
We have successfully time traveled.
That's right.
And we are back to the future again.
That's right. We're Back to the Future Part 3. So I think this one is the most interesting one because this is the one that you haven't listened to, Moon. So I'm curious kind of what your expectations are as someone who's a fan and as someone who has kind of enjoyed their albums throughout the years. Like, what are you expecting for Ghostlight here?
Honestly, I don't know. I'm very curious to see, does the singer still have it? Spoiler alert, yes, because I listened to the last album and that was like 4 years ago. I'm very concerned at the moment. And it's not the album's fault, it's not the band's fault. It's just that due to personal reasons, I have been on a very hardcore Slipknot kick recently.
Oh, sure, okay.
And because of that, it's like I'm getting really into the super heavy, super dark stuff at the moment.
Sure.
And it's like, is this going to color my expectations?
Right.
Because I honestly don't know. Like, I don't know how this album's going to go. I don't know how it's going to sound. Is it going to be same old Poets of the Fall? Is it going to be more experimental? Is it going to have the Psycho song on there somewhere? Unexplainably.
Just sneak in one of those in there.
Yeah. Please no. I hope no.
Never again, please.
It's like I don't know. Like I'm excited because obviously I got to listen to it for the first time. I think I've heard like one song from this album once, and I was like, wait, because it was one of those things where you're driving in the car, you have your streaming service of choice on. Hit us up for sponsorships. I'm not going to mention you by name unless you do so, please.
That's right.
You have your streaming service of choice on, and then all of a sudden the familiar voice comes on, the band that you know the sound of.
Yes.
And then you just glance at the screen really quick. It's like, I've never seen that album art in my life.
Right.
Like, what is that?
And they're like brand new single, Requiem for My Harlequin. Here we go. That's the single from this album. And you're like, oh, great. They must have a new album, I'm hoping. Maybe it's not just like the volume 2 B-sides and here's a song from 20 years ago. Fingers crossed.
Exactly. And then, like, literally, I think that day was when I did the research on it, and that was about probably 3 days before we had a production meeting. And the very first production meeting I mentioned Poets of the Fall,
right,
was probably when I found out about that, and I was like, oh, that would be a great thing to like to jump in at the end.
Right, putting it all together.
So if you are careful and studious, you can find out exactly when I listened to that one song for the very first time by listening to our production meetings.
Yeah. I'm also really curious about this because I think Temple of Thought, the last album we listened to, came out in 2012. And they had 3 albums between that one and this one. And I think I've been pleasantly surprised at how much they have continued to kind of figure out their whole thing throughout all of these albums. And how much tighter than the entire band seems to be each and every time. And I think if you look at Temple of Thought, the last album we listened to, and you excise that last track, they kind of had a really solid album with, for once, a really solid closing track. Like they really kind of nailed the whole. They really have good opening tracks, which I sort of expect here as well. But they kind of finally figured out how to balance the album a little bit more, and I'm hoping that's what they get to in this album, because I think that's really one of their only problems is just they need to figure out how to close an album out and kind of seal it up nicely.
Yup, they
Yeah.
really, really do.
Yeah.
I'm
And
I'm
not.
I'm hoping it ends positively. We'll say that much.
Mhm. Yeah. And other than that, I kind of I think like you, I think I expect the lead singer to still kind of have it. I think it sounds like he's taking care of his voice, so that's probably a thing he will have for a good long time. Um, I think we have found a a weakness for Poets of the Fall plus strings, so hopefully
Uh-huh.
some of those will show up here in this album. Um, but other than that, I'm not entirely sure if there's anything else. I feel like this is our fifth album we're listening to from them. I feel like I kind of know what to expect from them, which is kind of a good thing. And I'm kind of expecting like, yeah, just a bunch of Poets of the Fall songs. Some of them are going to be really solid. Some of them are going to be great. There's probably one in here that's going to be pretty rough, and then maybe a Poets of the Fall album.
Yeah.
So I think that's about it. Any last thoughts here before we go enjoy the album?
Not particularly. I mean, I hope it's good. I genuinely do. Like, I'm
Mm-hmm.
really looking forward to seeing what has changed
Yeah,
more importantly than ever anything else. And I
yeah,
hope it does. Like, I hope it doesn't stay the same.
yeah.
Like, that is something that I'm genuinely looking forward to, is seeing how they have evolved. For yourself, like, once we've done this, would you go back and fill in those slots, do you think? Like the ones that we've missed?
Yeah, probably, because I think in each album I find at least a handful of songs where I'm like, yeah, I really dig this. Like this is a really good track. Like I kind of dig what they're doing, and I would have to assume that the three albums we didn't listen to would have something in there as well that'd be like, yeah, I kind of dig this. Um,
Mhm.
so yeah, probably. And also there's a video for this album too for Requiem for My Harlequin. So we'll have to make sure we watch that because it's kind of rare we get videos in 2022. So it's kind of nice that a band is putting one out. So
Yep. Oh, I mean, do we even want to think about what the latest music videos is?
oh man, I don't even know. Goodness. All right.
It's
Well,
probably all AMVs.
yeah. I mean, we could only be so lucky. All right. On that note, let's go listen to the album.
Yep.
Welcome back. Listen to the album, our final Poets of the Fall album, and their most recent. And we're here to talk about it. Here to chat
Yes, we are.
about all 10 tracks. Um,
Uh-huh.
let's start here with first track here, Fire Dancer. Um, my first note nearly immediately is, oh wow, that's a much different intro.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. You, I think if you wanted to sort of draw a line in the sand and say like, yeah, this is a little bit of a different thing than we've done before, then that's a pretty good way to kick it off.
Yeah, it appears that like the 10 years skip of time that we did has changed things dramatically.
Yeah, things are a little bit different. There is a spoken word intro, which I was not the biggest fan of, but I don't think it ruins it. And I think I sort of appreciated it more after listening to the whole album, and the album ends with a spoken word thing, so it kind of brings it full circle. There's a guitar solo here. It's incredibly moody. It's a lot different. I gave it a 4 out of 5. I think
Uh-huh.
I think
It's super synthy. I'm
Yeah,
assuming that's synthy. Like, it sounds like it's got a lot of additional stuff in the background that I
yep.
was not expecting. Like, they're leaning into the synth quite a lot here, which is
Hmm.
kind of cool.
But it's interesting because the I didn't write very many of overall album notes for most of these albums, but for this one, I have liked a lot of the output of the band Ghost. They're Swedish, I think. Um,
Mhm.
but I didn't like the album that they put out this year in 2022 because it sounded a little too 80s in
Yep.
kind of a way that I didn't really appreciate. But I kind of like this album because it sounds a little too 80s. I'm not sure what the difference is, but I kind of appreciate that they're kind of leaning into this synth and power ballad, and we'll cover some more stuff as we go through. But I kind of appreciate that they took a different bend here after taking, what was it, 4 years since their previous album?
Yes, I believe so. This is the first album that they waited a fair amount of time
Right.
between the last album and this album.
Yeah. So it's interesting to see them do something a little different here. I
Uh-huh.
appreciate it. Next track here, Requiem for My Harlequin, which is still kind of a fun set of words to say. Um,
Yep. My first note here is that a xylophone? Because that sounds like a xylophone.
yeah, they got a bunch of stuff in this one. There's, yeah,
Like, huh?
yeah. Um, I give this one a 3 out of 5. I think this one's not bad. I think it's smart of them to have this as their lead single, because I think
Mm-hmm.
it sounds very much like a Poets of the Fall song. Um, I like that the strings are really strong in this one, but otherwise it's kind of good, but not great, which I think is okay.
Yeah. It's a fine song. Like, I think this is a good song, but it feels, and the minor spoiler alert, this is a very middle of the road kind of song.
Right.
Like, it's got some good all around, but it's like,
Nothing
okay.
outstanding, like nothing with a punch.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That is the thing that, like, that I feel like is lacking from this album,
Yeah.
is one of those songs that just hits.
Yeah. Looking at my scores, yep. Next track here, Sounds of Yesterday. I give this a 2.5 out of 5. Um, it's fine. I'm kind of not in the mood for this style of Poets of the Fall right now, which is
If you
more.
literally, my first note here is, oh, it's the wispy voice. Great.
Yeah, the high pitched stuff is a problem.
Mhm.
And his like whispery crooning thing, the combo of those two is not really doesn't really do it for me. And I think this track is kind of it's fine, but I just it's one of those ones where it's like I feel like your producer could have punched this one up a little bit and made it a lot stronger by doing something from the demo, but I don't really know what.
Yeah. I there's a couple of songs here where like, this is a cool song. Oh no, he's using the wispy voice. Like,
It's back.
which I think I've liked in one song, and that's it so far.
Hmm. Yeah.
I don't know.
Next track here is Revelations. I give this a 2.5 out of 5. I wrote it's not bad, but it's kind of forgettable. Um, I, I have strong opinions about nearly every other track on this album, sort of for good and for bad. This one,
Mhm.
it just sounds like a song. It happened.
Yep. What was your number on this one? Sorry.
2.5 out of 5. So
Okay.
it's fine. It's a song.
Yeah. My note here is this feels like a generic song.
Yeah, yeah. What's our next track? Heroes and Villains. Here we go. 1.5 out of 5. I just
It's that voice again. Second it showed up, I was like, come on.
It's that voice, man. I really think this could have been a cool power ballad if he had dropped the high pitched voice and he just. There's a song later on this album, I think it's the last track, where he like really goes for it and he really pushes his voice. That's this song to do it on in the chorus and just make it into this 80s hair metal power ballad thing. And I think this song could have been really cool. He just does the high pitched singing again, and it's killing me.
I wouldn't even mind, but it's because he's got such a powerful voice as well.
Yes.
Like in almost every single note range except for this, he has got such a good, strong range.
Yep.
But then he drops to the wispy, and it sounds. He's fine. He can do the notes. It's just he can't deliver them with the strength needed.
Right.
Like he can hit the notes, they're just not delivered well. That's how I feel about the wispy voice in this album. And there's like 3 songs that use it, and I'm like, enough.
please, someone stop him. I think this song on this album is probably the biggest bummer, as I think you could have made a cool song out of this, like something that would have showed up on a Godzilla soundtrack or like the end credits on an action movie. Like,
you do Jamiroquai like that.
I love Jamiroquai. I will not trash talk Jamiroquai. But it misses the mark completely in a way that I think is such a bummer. On the other side of the coin, next song is Lust for Life. I give it a 4 out of 5. This is the last track, but done correctly. I think this is you got good vocals, you got great guitars, you have a fun solo.
Yeah, it's a super simple song as well. Like he breaks it down, like it's broken down to its simplest pieces, which is just vocals and an acoustic guitar. No xylophone, no pan flutes, nothing else.
Right.
It's just that, and then they kick that like metal, like the electric guitar solo in the middle. It's like, okay, that adds a lot to this song.
Yep.
It's like great.
Yeah, the build up to that solo is really great. And like you said, like the acoustic guitar stuff, when they let the guitarist kind of loose on the stuff, he's a hell of a like acoustic guitar player, and I think it really makes these songs great. And I just I joked in, I think it was the last album, about one of the songs sounding like the Final Fantasy VIII, one of the town themes, but that stuff's good.
If you were going to crap talk the intro to Final Fantasy VIII video, I was going to get real mad.
No, of course not. Why would I crap talk the Succession of Witches? But I think this one really clicked with me, and I think this is one of those songs where it's like, yeah, like you got it on this one. I think you cracked the code and you solved it, and you should make a lot more of these tracks. These are really good. Yeah. Next track here is Chasing Echoes. I give this a 3 out of 5. It's kind of a standard Poets of the Fall song. Giving it some extra love here, though, because of the strings, and as we found out over the season, just a big sucker for them.
Yep. This feels like a Poet song, like, to me.
Yeah.
Like, but not a strong Poet song, like a very middle of the road Poet song, where it's like, yeah, okay, it's not a bad song, but it's fine, but it does get the little extra love because of the additional accoutrement in the background, and it's just like,
yeah, that's the good stuff.
We'll get there in the end as well.
Yeah. Next one is Weaver of Dreams. I gave this
the weirdest song on the album.
Yeah, I gave this a 3 out of 5. I kind of liked this a lot because I think they took the ballad stuff that they've really been trying to nail down in this album, and they made it kind of moodier, and then they put an acoustic guitar solo at the end, and I think all of it kind of comes together pretty nicely.
Yeah, it's weird how it... Like, my notes literally say, this is a very weird song, but I kind of like it, and I can't really explain why.
Yeah.
Like, the way everything combines is just it's a pretty solid like combination of every part of it. It's not, don't get me wrong, it's not standout, it's not stellar, but it's a pretty solid song.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it feels like another track where they've kind of cracked the code. Where it's like, all right, yeah, you're kind of getting it here. And then we do Hello Cabaret, 2 out of 5. I wrote high notes. Girl, blah, blah.
There they are again. Otherwise, it would have been a good song.
Yeah,
like it would have been so much
he
better
and
for those.
I really have to give him credit. He really does go for it, and he really does try, and it just doesn't work. And I don't know. It's one of these albums where you listen to it and you're like, I think you just needed a different producer, and you just needed someone to come in and shake it up and tell you no. And I just don't think they had that. Any other notes here for Hello Cabaret?
My first note is it's fine, I guess.
If I must.
And then I've done the straight face because of that voice again.
Yeah. And our last track here, Beyond the Horizon, I couldn't figure out whether or not to give this a 2.5 out of 5 or a 3 out of 5. So it's sort of 2.75, though that's not really a real ranking. I really appreciate that they go for it this time. This huge, bombastic, big closer of an album, and they're going for it. And I don't think it 100% clicks with me personally, but I think it achieves one of our biggest criticisms of this band's output that we've listened to this entire season has been learn how to finish an album. And I feel like they got it this time. Like they came out with this big closer, and I think it works really well. The spoken word thing at the end is still fine, like it was in the intro. It makes this kind of closes the circle interestingly, but I appreciate that they
hadn't done that.
Yeah, I there always has to be something wrong with the Pose of the Fall outro track, I guess, and it's got to be that, I guess. But I do appreciate that they really went for it. I think it was largely successful.
Yeah, I like this one as well because this is like the like the rock opera kind of approach that I really appreciate in bands. Like I love a bit of cheese on my rock. Like you get me some rock opera cheese, and it's like please, every time. Like I was annoyed with my streaming music platform of choice because I have a specific band that I listen to that is kind of rock opera. You all know who they are. We've talked about them this season. It's Muse. And they changed it from the band Muse because I had to use voice controls. So they started playing a different station with the same name. And I was like, what is going on? Why am I getting these songs I don't care about?
I didn't ask for this station. I asked, come on. Yeah, that's a good point. I feel like that like operatic theatrical kind of thing I think would do Poets of the Fall really well, and I think this is the closest they've kind of gotten to it.
Like here is something like we get obviously actually no, let's do our album wrap ups, then I got a question, then we got the thing to take care of at the end.
I think this album is fine. I think there's Lust for Life I really like. I think that's a cool track. I think there's a couple of tracks in here that are kind of solid Poets of the Fall tracks. But man, the rest of the album is just a whiff.
It's a middle of the road album. Like it's
and all the
listened to this before, it's like how far we have fallen from God kind of thing.
And like there's some okay stuff in here, but every single track with the either like the whispery vocals or the high pitched stuff, it just isn't working. It hasn't worked for the last couple albums we've heard. It probably didn't work in the last couple albums we skipped. It's just please. and I'm gonna have an unpopular opinion here. I think it would be really interesting for Poets of the Fall to pivot to putting out EPs instead of full albums. I think if you ask them to put out a 5-track album, I think they'll kill it. And I think they could do a really, really great job. I just think sometimes the length of these albums leads us to having like it's a 10-track album and 4 or 5 of them are ballads, which is fine, but they're just not nailing all of them. I think that's kind of frustrating. But
Do you
otherwise,
think
it's fine.
do you think Poets would have benefited from the music selling of our youth when it was a lot of singles and then B-sides and covers and stuff like that on the singles?
Yeah.
Like, I'll give him credit as well. Not a single cover that I'm aware of in this entire album thing that we've done. Like, no covers at
Oh,
all.
yeah, that's a good point. I never even thought about that.
Which
That's
a lot
interesting.
of bands kind of lean on that sometimes. Like,
Yeah.
I can't think of a band that I listen to that I like that hasn't done a cover. Maybe Tool.
No, they did Led Zeppelin's No Quarter, sort of famously.
Oh, there you go then.
Yeah. That's really interesting. That's surprising. Um, you do
So
bring up a good point though. Like in the CD singles era, where you're putting out a CD with like, here's the single, here's a B side, we put out a cover, and here's a live track, and it's like, all right, yeah, you put out 4 kind of cool tracks. Or, um, for our generation, there's the Smashing Pumpkins box, the black and white box that had like the five or six CD singles of the Melancholy era. Like that feels well suited to a band like this, where it's like you have one weird track, you got a couple of cool songs, you have one really great B side. I feel like that's kind of the lane that they're in, and I'd kind of love to see if they would, like Nine Inch Nails did with their albums from 2020 and 2021. It'd be kind of neat to see. For anyone who doesn't know, Nine Inch Nails put out 3 EPs, kind of back to back, and they were kind of a little bit more experimental. And I'd like to see Poets of the Fall do something similar, where it's like, here's 5 tracks. Let's see what you think
yeah,
of this one. Next one will be different.
I mean, I think that the ironic thing is they control everything from top to
Yeah.
bottom now because
Yep.
they're putting everything out under their own label. They produce everything themselves. Like
Yep.
it's one of those things. It's like you have the control to be able to do this kind of thing.
Yeah.
So let's see what you got.
It's very much a double-edged sword for them. Like
Uh-huh.
they need to. I feel like they need someone in there to. I'm not saying like get Butch Vig in the studio or anything, but like I feel like they need someone to kind of get them back on the path, maybe a little bit. Again,
Yeah,
this album isn't bad. You can see the brilliance kind of shining through in a lot of these tracks if they just made some different decisions here. So
yeah.
yeah,
All right. So now I have 2 questions.
sure.
And we can actually backlog this back to the first musical season if you'd like.
Oh, okay.
Name another group that you would like Poets of the Fall to work with to produce like a mashup song or EP.
Oh boy. Um, you know, I'm actually I actually have 2 choices, and they're both kind
So
of
do I.
weird. Okay.
So do I.
I feel like we might share my second one, so I'll have that one go second. I'd actually like to see them connect with Silver Sun Pickups. I think Silver Sun Pickups. I love them very dearly, but I think their weakness, like with the other band that I'm going to talk about, has always sort of been lyrics. Where Silver Sun Pickups lyrics aren't always the clearest. I think Poets of the Fall does a really good job of delivering very kind of clear and unambiguous lyrics. I think sometimes that can lead the songs to be a little bit cheesy, but I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. But I think Silver Sun has done a really good job of evolving their sound and playing to their strengths over 6, 7 albums or something. And I feel like that's a little bit of what Poets of the Fall kind of needs, is like you kind of need to take that next step. Like you need to, and the next step is not the high pitched vocals. It's something else.
Yeah.
And my other one would be the one you mentioned earlier, which is Muse. Like,
Mhm.
And Muse has that. Muse has, over the last couple of years, they have descended into the fully up their butt status of like operatic rock, which don't always click with. Um,
Hmm.
but if you have a big band putting on big albums and big shows, it's Muse. And I think Poets of the Fall could use to rock a little bit more and be operatic and be bigger and be, more arena-ish. And I think that would work well for
Hmm.
them.
So we didn't share one. That's the good news.
Oh, okay.
My first pick would be Hailstorm,
Okay.
which I introduced you to, I think, last week off air. I
I
think we were
think so,
talking
yeah.
about them, which is a more heavy metal band with a female front lead
Yep.
singer, but they are super dark in their lyrics and super explicit in a lot of
Yeah.
their stuff. And I'd like to see a combination of the relatively wholesome Poets of the Fall
Hmm.
mixed with the relatively dark and heavier version of Hailstorm.
Yeah, because
Um,
that has been a criticism of mine kind of the entire season, that I know this isn't what they go for, but I wish there was more bite to the lyrics. Like I usually like lyrics that are, or musicians that are of storytellers. You look at your kind of your Ben Folds and things like that, or stuff that's really biting. Like you look at Matthew Good, you look at some artists like that where they're very acerbic. And I know that isn't this band, but I kind of wish they had a little bit more teeth.
yeah, if you want good examples of Hailstorm songs to listen to see what I'm talking about, I Miss the Misery is a song about an abusive relationship that
Hmm.
they miss, which is super dark.
Yep.
Um, Do Not Disturb is I cannot talk about the content of that for
Right.
a specific reason. And there is another one which it starts I get, and then I'm not going to finish that sentence for the same kind of reason. Um, but they also have like good power songs, like Amen is a great power song by them. And it's like,
Right.
okay, cool. I'd like to see that combined with them.
Right.
Um, my second choice is Apocalyptica.
Oh, sure. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Like poets have shown that they do like the strings and stuff like that.
Yep.
And Apocalyptica can write some sick songs. Sometimes all they need is a good front singer.
Right.
Like you get Apocalyptica, you combine them with the two guitarists we have here. Yes, obviously the drummer and everything else, but I think there's a good combination to be made there, and it's what Apocalyptica does. Like they bring in lead singers for their stuff and
Yeah.
like guest spots for musicians. So come on,
Yeah, that'd be fun.
get on the phone with them.
Yeah. Yeah. Um,
Uh, my second question, which
sure.
you almost jumped over.
No, I
Um,
was about to wrap up my thoughts about the band overall, but I will lead you into your second question here.
yes. What will they? What would you like to hear both this band and Nine Inch Nails cover?
Oh boy.
Because I got the easiest answer ever for Poets of the Fall,
Okay, that's the one I'm
and
struggling with.
it's trite and it's overdone because everybody has covered this song.
Hmm.
But give me a Poets of the Fall Thunderstruck, please, because
That'd be
everyone has
really
done
great.
it. But I think he's got the vocals to make it a completely different song.
Well, now I want a Nine Inch Nails Thunderstruck. Just make it real weird.
Oh yeah.
Um, man, I don't know what I want Poets of the Fall to cover because he has such a unique voice and such a unique delivery that I would really want something kind of out of left field, like have him do like a cover of a Taylor Swift song or something, like kind of really
Mm.
take something that, like Ryan Adams' 1989 album where he covers the entire Taylor Swift album, kind of taking something that's a little bit more poppy and morphing it into your sound. I think that would be kind of something interesting to. I've also been listening to a lot of Taylor Swift, so her new album's great. Um, So yeah, I guess that would probably be my choice. Just to see, like, I like when bands like this, or rock bands in general, kind of cover a pop song, or the reverse, where um, the Nine Inch Nails cover of "Head Like a Hole" for Black Mirror that changed the lyrics, and I don't remember who sang that. Um, kind of taking the opposite the opposite approach to it.
Yeah, it's the Mad World moment all over again.
Yeah, um, like that. Um, what was that called from? Oh yeah, Miley Cyrus covered "Head Like a Hole" and changed it up for a Black Mirror episode. It was very good. It was good.
I remember everyone raving about that cover as well.
Yeah, it's pretty good. Um, I think my last notes here before we go into the closer here is that I like Poets of the Fall a lot. I think a lot of the output we've listened to from them has been really solid. Um,
Mm-hmm.
it's definitely one of those artists that when they come out with a new album, I'll be like, yeah, I'll listen to more Poets of the Fall. Sure, let's give this new album a spin. Um, I don't know if it's going to be one of those where I seek it out. I'm not like, yeah, I'm gonna listen to Poets of the Fall today. I might, but this is definitely one of those ones where, like, I listen most of the time. I listen to music. I have my entire collection on shuffle, and this is definitely one of those ones where it's like, yeah, I could listen to one Poets of the Fall song on shuffle, and like, oh yeah, this track's great, and then kind of keep moving. How have you felt about Poets of the Fall now that we've kind of revisited one of your favorite artists?
I think I still adore them.
Mm,
I think my preference of albums has changed, which we'll get into in a little bit.
right.
Um, and I think when I'm not listening to heavier stuff, which, as we discussed last time, is something that I'm doing right now because I kind of need to,
Hmm.
they are always a solid fallback for me. Like,
Yeah.
always. Like, it's just one of those things that, like, I'll always have them in the background. They're never that far from my musical surface, kind of thing.
Or if you need a good album
Uh,
to sing to.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Like, especially like when you have something on in the background and just something will pop on and it's just like, okay, yeah, I really adore this thing.
Yep.
Um, they'll always be solid for that. I still absolutely adore them.
Hmm.
I get that they speak specifically to me, and I have a lot of like emotional investment throughout most of these albums, like
Right.
because I've been listening to them for 10, 20 years now at this point.
Right.
Um, it's always a band I will recommend to people because there'll always be something there for somebody.
That's
Like,
true. Yeah.
they have kind of such a range that it's like, okay, this album's probably not for you, but maybe not this album. Like,
Hmm.
someone I know was asking for music recommendations, and based on their taste of music that I knew, I was like, okay, skip Signs of Life, just go straight to Carnival Rust.
Right.
That's the album that you would like out of the ones I am aware of, kind of thing.
It's like that famous Radiohead flowchart where it's like, start with OK Computer. If that's too weird, listen to this. If that's not weird enough, listen to this. And like, it kind of goes through a thing of like, if you liked that, listen to this. If you didn't like that, listen to this. Like, you can kind of tailor your recommendations so you find the right album.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But no, I still like them. I still adore them. They're probably still one of my favorite bands.
Hmm.
That shifts on a day-to-day basis, as everything kind
Oh,
of
sure.
does.
I'm glad we didn't come out of this being like, nope, don't like him anymore. We've
My
ruined
question
the
is,
magic.
will you do the missing slots when you like? Do you think you might like give them?
Yeah, I probably will because I feel like there's in each one of these albums, I feel like there's at least a handful of songs that either I really like or I kind of click with. So I feel like
Mhm.
going back and listening to those older albums, I'll probably find a handful more songs of just like, oh man, on Ultraviolet, there's like these 3 tracks back to back that are really great. I haven't done that on the intervening weeks, but I probably will here over the next couple of weeks, just to like I like them well enough to keep going through the rest of the stuff and try and find more cool stuff that I enjoy.
Mm-hmm.
All right, since we're at the end of the season here, we're gonna get to our season ranking as we are wont to do. We're gonna start with number 5. What is your 5th album here? Your number 5.
I think we might be in the same case here. It's Ghostlight.
I'm actually Ghostlight is not on my
Oh,
bottom. Yeah,
interesting.
yeah,
And it might just be because I haven't listened to her enough, but it's kind of like it's very middle of the road. Like
yeah,
every other album that we've done has got one banger where I'm just like, yeah, okay,
yeah.
I'll definitely listen to that song.
Mine is Signs of Life, and I feel like this is just because of its age. Not
Mm-hmm.
that it's a bad album, but I feel like the further we've gotten into their catalog, the more that I feel like I've kind of naturally clicked with their output. And Signs of Life obviously isn't bad, but I think for me there was less stuff there to kind of like, and but it's another one of those. I think like we talked about when we talked about the album at the beginning of the season. If I had listened to that album when it came out, it probably been like a 10 out of 10. This is the greatest. You got to listen to this unknown band, etc., etc. But
Mm-hmm.
as of now, I think it's really good. I mean, all 5 of these albums are good, but something has to be at the bottom.
Yep.
Number 4 for you.
Twilight Theatre.
Okay.
It's a good album. Like this is probably the hardest top 5 I've done. There's minimal difference between like
I had a really hard time. Our
between the
listener,
4. Like there's almost
yeah,
no difference for me. Basically, it's like which one squishes out the other ones kind
our
of thing.
lists are also very different immediately.
Awesome. Um, there's a lot I love on Twilight Theatre. There is like 3 or 4 great songs in that,
Hmm.
but that's this. This list is what's it called? It's not sway. Tilt.
Mm.
This top 5 is tilted for me a lot because I have, as I mentioned, a lot of emotional investment
Oh,
in all of
absolutely.
the different albums.
Right.
And Twilight Theatre is probably the one I have the least in after Ghostlight.
Mm.
But still, it's probably got like 3 of the best songs that we covered, maybe.
Right.
Uh, Dreaming War and 15-minute Flame. Like
Yes. That's a heck
like
of a
I
combo.
uh-huh.
Yep.
But like you said, something has to be there, and
That's
for me
right.
it's these.
Yeah. My number 4 is Carnival of Rust. Um, this isn't in chronological order, I promise. But I think this is another one for me that I think they got closer to what I kind of like from them, and I think thematically this is probably one of their strongest ones. Um, but I don't think it has the highest highs in these albums we listen to. I don't think it has the lowest lows either, which makes this
Uh-huh.
this list kind of hard to create. Um, but I think Carnival Rust is really solid. But I think the lows on that album, I think, kind of push it down here a little bit for me.
Yeah, understandably.
Number 3.
Signs of Life.
Okay.
This used to be my number 1 with a
Oh,
bullet
okay.
every single time. And like you said, I think because it's been so long since I've like sat down and actually thought about this kind of stuff. I think you're right. It does suffer a little bit. It's probably got maybe my favorite song by Poets, which is Lift.
That's a great song.
Um, like it's probably my favorite song of theirs, but I think you are right. I think this is it has aged a little bit,
Hmm.
and the emotions connected with these particular songs as well have also turned sour and then ripened again,
Okay.
and then turned sour and then ripened again. So
Right.
it's like I don't know where it sits at the moment, and like
Right.
it's just one of those things where it's like if I'm going to put an album on, it's not going to be that right now. It's going to be one of the next 2 essentially.
Okay. This is number 3, right?
Yes.
Okay. Mine is Ghostlight. I think Ghostlight halfway gets there, like we just talked about. And I think there's some pretty good highs, but there's some pretty low lows, like we just talked about. These bottom 3 were pretty tough. I feel like any day you could probably switch them. It's not. I feel like I had a more definitive list for Nine Inch Nails, but it's the flip though, where I've had 30 years of Nine Inch Nails sort of lived experiences as opposed to 2 months for this one. So Ghostlight's fine. So it's in the middle of the list because it's fine. Number 2.
Carnival of Rust.
Okay.
Because I would say at the moment, out of all of these albums, Carnival of Rust is their darkest one, I would argue, that we've covered. And for whatever reason, it clicked a lot more with me now than it used to do.
Right.
There's still some horrendous tracks on that album, as there is on all of them, to be honest.
Right.
And I know we differ on. That's probably the album where we differ the most as well, where you and I both have massively different scores.
Right.
Like that's the one where I would do a song high, you would do a song low, and it balanced out in the end either way. But
right.
I think Carnival of Rust is still one of their best albums easily, I would say.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, our point spread this time was minus 1.5.
Oh, all right. That's not so bad. My number 2 is Temple of Thought. Of course, exacting out the last track we shan't speak of. This and the other album, I could easily switch between 1 and 2. I think they're pretty close. But I think Temple of Thought for me is kind of them. I know I had some problems, some pretty low lows on this, but I feel like I liked a couple of really strong tracks in there, and I think the highs for me were really, really high, especially like Ballad of Jeremiah Peacekeeper. Like I think there's some really strong tracks on that album, and I think the kind of the good outweighs some of the middling there on that album.
Yeah.
And what's your number 1?
Temple of Thought.
Hey, there you go.
Pretty much exactly what you said. I don't know what happened. I don't know why this suddenly jumped up to number 1. Like this used to be my number 3. It used to be Science, Carnival, Temple, like in that order, and now it's Temple, Carnival, Science. Like Science and Temple have flipped. But it's listening to it this time. It's like, okay, there's a lot of good songs on this. Like a lot of good songs.
Yeah.
And even when I used to listen to it previously, and when I listen to it this time, I still skip that final song because, as far as I'm concerned, that doesn't exist.
If this was like when we were still burning CDs, that would be like you just take that track off when you burn the CD. Like that just
100%.
Yeah. You don't even. It doesn't even happen.
Yeah, like all of the skits on the early Eminem song, Eminem album.
That's right.
Just
cut them right out.
Any of that.
Yep. Pull them right out. My number 1 is Twilight Theater, and I feel like both of these albums are kind of right next to each other, and you could probably any day you could probably flip them. But I kind of like this era of Poets of the Fall that we listened to with the like Temple of Thought and Twilight Theater era. I feel like they're introducing the strings, they're introducing synths. Lyrically, they're a little bit stronger, and I feel like they have more back-to-back strong songs rather than here's a really good song and a couple ones that are fine, and here's a really good one, and ooh, these two are bad, and then here's a really good one. It feels like a more kind of even experience between those two albums. And this was just a real knee-jerk reaction of Twilight Theater being like, this one is better, I guess, today, maybe? Question mark. But you can't go wrong with either Temple of Thought or Twilight Theater. I think both are really great.
Yeah. In all honesty, I don't think you can really go wrong with any of these 5. I think these are all good, solid 5.
Yep.
I despise Revolution Roulette, so I'm sure that you will adore that album.
Probably. That's how it usually goes for between us with music.
I'll get a text from you like in the middle of the week next week or something, just saying, "Hey, Revolution Roulette is a banger of an album."
Yeah, like,
So
why didn't we
it's
listen to
worth
this? This thing's
watching.
great. Oh, man. All right. Thank you very much, everyone, for listening to another musical season. And we're planning some future ones in the pipe at some point. I think we like doing one of these every once in a while. It's kind of a fun change of pace. Please stay tuned for season 18, where we kind of celebrate the year that was 2022. And if you are a patron at patreon.com/E1M1,
Those ones are the digits.
the $5 or higher tier, you get to listen to the season 18 production meeting, where Moon and I go through an uncensored look, sort of a peek behind the curtain, about how we kind of produce the show and plan it and do horrible damage to each other on what we're going to do for future seasons. So go check that out.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you very much, everyone, for listening, and we'll see you next time. Excuse me. Bye. All right, and we can stop recording. Click.